Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Sukti Didal, and I'm the director of the Bernstein Institute for Human Rights at NYU School of Law. And it's a total privilege to be the moderator for today's JusticePower teach-in on community hotlines. Before we begin, we just want to note that the teach-in will be available in both English and Spanish. And Azucena, one of our fabulous language justice interpreters, will provide instructions now on how to log on. Azucena, over to you.
Thank you, and thanks for making this a multilingual space. In order to access the interpretation, I'm going to ask people to look at if you are connecting from your computer, if you're on your computer right now, look at the bottom right part of your Zoom screen, and you're going to see a little globe that says interpretation. If you click on it, you will be able to select English or Spanish. So please select your language of preference. If you are joining us from a cell phone or a tablet, and can you advance to the next slide, please? If you are joining us from a cell phone or a tablet, you're going to find the language interpretation function by clicking on the three dots that say more or más. And if you click there, you're going to find language interpretation. You click on language interpretation, you select your language of preference, and just make sure you click done. My colleague Vic is right now going to go over to the English channel, and just make sure you can hear him. And if you don't, just let us know, raise your hand or something and let us know, and we'll help you figure it out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Oh, there's more.
There's more. So the next one, please. Y bueno, bienvenidos y gracias porque hicieron de este evento un evento multilingüe. Para poder tener acceso a la interpretación en inglés o en español, les voy a pedir, los que están conectándose desde su pantalla, que vean en la parte de abajo, a mano derecha de su pantalla de Zoom, los que se conectan desde su computadora, perdón, van a encontrar un icono que dice interpretación, es como un globito. Ahí por favor hacen clic y van a encontrar la opción de seleccionar inglés o español. Elijan su idioma de preferencia y entonces van a poder escuchar el taller, esta sesión en ese idioma. Next screen, please. Si nos están acompañando desde un teléfono o una tableta, la función de interpretación la van a encontrar en los tres puntitos que dicen más o more. Hacen clic ahí, encuentran la función de interpretación de idiomas, seleccionan su idioma y por favor asegúrense de hacer clic en listo o done para que funcione. Y mi compañero Vic ahorita se va a ir al canal de español. Si no lo pueden escuchar o algo, por favor, háganoslo saber. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Sí, puedo escucharte.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Vic and Azucena. And the JusticePower teach-ins are done in partnership with the Bernstein Institute for Human Rights, which is an academic center dedicated to advancing human rights through legal empowerment, community-driven justice research, advocacy, and education, and the Immigration Advocates Network, which is an organization that harnesses the power of technology in collaboration to support immigrants and their allies, and a JusticePower network partner. This is our fourth JusticePower teach-in, and we're just so thrilled to have our friends from Grassroots Leadership with us today. I will now introduce the panel topic, the speakers, and the format, and then we can get started. Today, as you may have seen from the description, we're going to learn how community hotlines can build the knowledge and power of immigrant communities. Our friends from Grassroots will uplift the ways in which community hotlines can be a powerful tool of accompaniment, a tool for organizing, and directly feed into the work that the organizations are engaged in. They'll also reflect on how this can be difficult, the challenges, the costs, how do you sustain, especially when thinking about building community hotlines that are built by and for community. To take us deep into this work, we have two really fantastic justice warriors with us. We have Alicia Torres. Alicia, you want to just say wave? Alicia works and builds community with ICE Fuera de Austin and Grassroots Leadership. ICE Fuera de Austin is a community-based group led by and for the undocumented community of Austin. It's a space committed to collaborative learning, collaborative support, and fighting for families that are under the threat of deportation. Alicia is originally from Central Mexico, but has called Austin home since 1992. We'll also hear from Sulma Franco. Hi, Sulma. Sulma is a Guatemalan immigrant who has been impacted by the ICE jail system, being detained for almost 2 years in 5 different ICE detention centers. And while incarcerated, Sulma began to fight and organize several other incarcerated women who fought their cases to stop their deportation and get out of detention when they didn't have lawyers to represent them. Sulma was released after posting a $15,000 bond, and 3 months later received a letter from ICE saying that she'd be deported. In response to that, she started to organize community members, moved into the first Unitarian Universalist Church in Austin, and founded the Austin Sanctuary Network. Sulma is currently the organizer of the detention program at Grassroots, and she leads community members in fighting for the closure of the T. Don Hutto Detention Center and advocates for the release of women from detention. She also leads programs such as the Mujeres Luchadoras, a group of women who were formerly impacted by the ICE incarceration system and used their personal stories and firsthand experience to build power and lead campaigns and actions to transform the discriminatory and racist criminal legal system and to build free, safe, and healthy communities. So it's truly such an honor to have you both with us, and thank you for taking the time, especially with the state of the world and the state of the world in Texas. And before we get into the presentation by Sulma and Alicia, just wanted to take a few minutes to ground us in legal empowerment and JusticePower. So Tyler, if you could. So JusticePower today's webinar is part of the JusticePower teach-in series on legal empowerment and immigration. We're a network of community activists and lawyers who engage in and think deeply about community-centered approaches to not only build power, but increase access to justice. And the kind of animating fundamental principle that grounds our work is this idea of legal empowerment. And so just to zoom out a little bit at the global level, what do we mean by legal empowerment and how does it relate to the immigration context here in the US? Tyler, if you could shift to the next slide. While you're organizing that. The access to justice crisis, issues of communities not being engaged directly in their own rights struggles is not something that is unique to the United States. This is a global problem. Currently, there are about 5 billion people in the world who live without meaningful access to justice. And legal empowerment is one of the strategies that tries to change that. And it does that through this idea of democratization of laws, of legal systems, of translation, of disruption, and most importantly, transferring power and resources to those who are directly impacted by the justice system such that they can then know, use, shape, and eventually transform the systems that impact their lives. And the field gets its roots from the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. There were growing collectives of community activists, people working and people that were volunteering with churches, many of whom were non-lawyers, who were working together to document instances of abuses, of violations of law, to organize, and then to be able to lead for the change in the racist system that defined the apartheid movement and unfortunately has remnants still today. today, what started from South Africa in the last 50 years is now a global movement with around 2,300 organizations that identify their work in this space of legal empowerment in at least 190 countries. And immigration in the US, as we all know, and many of us on the call here today know, has been by design living in an access to justice crisis. I think recent figures showed that 37% of immigrants secured legal rep in their removal cases. Only 14% had access to legal counsel when detained. And the result of that is that many of us are forced to navigate a labyrinth, a maze of very technical statutes and regulations with little to absolutely no support. And the burden is on us to raise the defenses, to understand the law, to pursue avenues of relief and release. And this barrier to accessing legal resources and knowledge not only contributes to worse legal outcomes, but it's disempowering and it's re-traumatizing for those of us who are forced to fight for our right to remain. That said, and this is really the basis behind the journey we began in 2018 in partnership with the Global Justice Clinic at NYU, was to document and make visible organizations like Grassroots who are out there, who are thinking really critically and really creatively about how do you engage in this system in a way that can empower, can build up, can attack both the criminal and the immigration system in a way that still stays by and for community. And so we started talking to a number of organizations, and through that process, we documented some legal empowerment strategies that they were engaged in, like, for example, community hotlines from today, but others that include accompaniment, pro se legal clinics, the use of technology. And those strategies culminated in the launch of the JusticePower website, which is justicepower.org, where you can really see a range of different strategies that these organizations are engaging in. And our hope is that this not only makes it visible, but it encourages other immigrant rights organizations, practitioners, lawyers, the like, to get engaged and to think differently about how do they work within this justice system. So undoubtedly, the world has shifted and continues to shift since 2018, and the work of organizations like Grassroots feels more important than it's ever felt. And so we're really excited to go into the strategy of community hotlines. As I mentioned, Alicia and Sulma will kick us off with about 15 to 20 minutes of just a presentation on their community hotlines. I'll then come back and we'll have some moderated Q&A, and then we absolutely encourage all of you to please share questions through the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to make sure that those get woven in throughout the session. I think that is it for me. Alicia and Sulma, over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ziki, for that introduction. Thanks everyone for sharing your time and space today. Like you said, my name is Alicia Torres, and before we actually launch in, I wanted to share a little bit about Grassroots Leadership. Now, like many organizations probably out there, we go through different iterations, right, of not just of staff, but of an identity as an organization. And so for the sake of time, I will share where we're at, who currently is Grassroots, because I do believe, and I wanted to what I'm sharing, I think it's important because it definitely informs what and how the work is done, and why we even have such things as the hotline in particular, and why it's run the way that it is. And so just a little bit about us. It is very important to mention that we are an organization that is led by directly impacted people. Not directly impacted might have a very odd definitions, but for Grassroots Leadership, it means that every person that is on staff and that is directing some sort of program has been impacted by the carceral system being defined as jails, federal, state, county, and yes, immigration detention centers that that within itself are jails for us. Both of our executive directors have been personally impacted, having served, one having served 20 years in state prison, and the other one having herself been inside detention center, having been in deportation proceedings. I myself am undocumented. My family, the entirety of my family, with the exception of your younger sibling, and another one who was able to adjust status through the 86 amnesty. Everybody else is undocumented. So we are part of that community at large that really lives under the threat of constant deportation, right? Now, we are also a base building organization. What does that mean? We not aim to build not just community power, but actually build community, right? I do think that we have to differentiate what between power and building community is. We do that through three main base groups. That is TOSH, Texas Advocates for Justice, Mujeres Luchadoras, and Eyes for the Austin. Texas Advocates for Justice is a group at the state level that really centers the experience, the voices of folks in the state and federal prisons in Texas. Mujeres Luchadoras centers voices and experiences of women previously detained, specifically the Hutto Detention Center, which is the detention center we are organizing and have an ongoing campaign to shut down. And Eyes Fuera the Austin centers voices and experiences of those families in the central Austin area and surrounding areas, because of we are finding ourselves as a consequence of displacement, we're having to move into rural areas, right? So now we have to say not just Austin, but Austin and surrounding areas. So those are the three groups, right? That really, that one collectively we build community and makes up the direct membership of Grassroots Leadership. Now, really important to say, right, these three groups, what are we doing together? What kind of community are we building? What kind of work are we doing, right, when we work collaboratively? What we're doing is we're building towards practicing, not just naming, but actually practicing organizing around the work of immigration, right? Immigration being that deep intersection between the carceral system and the immigration system. We do that via having a criminal justice team and immigration team, and we also are considered a participatory defense hub, right? It is at that participatory defense hub that the criminal justice and immigration team we're building towards that being the space where a lot of collaborative learning is happening, right? But independently, we do have a CJ team and an immigration team, which of course we work together and are intentional about the work that we do. We are also, we're based in Texas, and we have offices both in Austin and in Houston. So that is a little bit of context just to inform everybody about who Grassroots Leadership is, and probably gives insight into how how it gives insight into what the work that we do is, and how and why it's done the way that it's done. So yeah, with all that said, I pass it on to my colleague Sulma. And also, just to be clear, you know, today we'll be covering two hotlines that are under Grassroots Leadership, that being the Hutto hotline, or linea de Hutto, and then the community defense hotline. And again, I'll pass it to Sulma, who will be covering the Hutto hotline.
Ok, muchas gracias a todos por estar acá. Como ya lo dijeron, ya me presentaron, soy una mujer inmigrante guatemalteca. Estoy acá desde el 2010, que mi primer hogar fue un centro de detención, entonces soy una mujer totalmente impactada, ¿verdad?, por el sistema carcelario. Y el primer lugar que visité en Estados Unidos, pues, es el centro de detención de Hutto, que está aproximadamente a 45 minutos de la ciudad de Austin. es ahí donde inicié mi primera lucha con el sistema carcelario de inmigración y de las leyes racistas que existen en el estado de Texas. Todos sabemos de que Texas se ha vuelto un laboratorio de leyes absurdas, unas leyes totalmente horrendas para las comunidades inmigrantes y las personas negras. Y entonces estas leyes se expanden por todo Estados Unidos, pero quiero hablarles acerca de la línea de Hutto, que esta línea es una herramienta que fue creada en el 2018. Se inició en el 2018 debido a la separación de familias, donde empezaban a quitarle los niños, fueron separados de sus madres y eran trasladados a otros lugares y las madres también. Entonces, esto era algo terrible de poner a los niños, no había nadie que supiera cómo organizar, no había la gente, cómo podía movilizarse. Entonces recibimos, no teníamos en Hutto, tenemos un programa de visitas y en ese programa de visitas pudimos contactar a unas madres que estaban totalmente destrozadas porque habían sido arrebatadas en la frontera por la patrulla fronteriza de sus hijos y no sabían nada, y es así como surgió la línea de Hutto, que es una línea también de defensa, ¿verdad? Y que es la herramienta principal para poder tener comunicación entre los familiares y las personas que están detenidos dentro del centro de detención. ¿Cómo inició esta línea? Algunas veces cuando íbamos a visitar nos dábamos cuenta, ¿verdad?, de que las personas no tenían cómo llamar a sus familiares, no sabían a dónde acudir, y entonces ideamos de crear esta línea y utilizamos un número de Google Voice. Esta línea es un número de Google Voice donde nosotros podemos depositar dinero a esa línea para que esas mujeres, cuando son arrestadas, aunque no cuenten con dinero, ellas pueden sacar esas llamadas y comunicarse con nosotros sin tener que pagar. Normalmente cuando las personas son arrestadas, son despojadas de sus propiedades y en ocasiones utilizan el dinero, el poco dinero que traen, o si no traen dinero, es puesto dentro de una cuenta que se le llama la comisaria, que tienen que esperar para ser procesadas por lo menos hasta una semana para poder obtener ese dinero en sus cuentas. Entonces pasa más de una semana para que ellas puedan tener comunicación con sus familiares o sus seres queridos. Entonces, esa fue la intención de crear ese número, facilitarle a estas personas que pudieran comunicarse en el menor tiempo posible con sus seres queridos y poder hablar de su situación actual. La línea es una herramienta bastante importante porque también nos permite alzar las voces de lo que está sucediendo adentro del centro de detención, donde las mujeres pueden comunicarse con nosotros o que necesitan también un asesoramiento legal sobre su caso. Las personas que reciben estas llamadas están capacitadas, específicamente soy yo la que recibo, para saber qué es una fianza, cuál es el proceso de una fianza, cuál es el proceso de un sponsor, cuál es el proceso de una apelación de caso. Tenemos esa experiencia y tratamos de dar un asesoramiento a esas personas por medio de la línea también, o a sus familiares directamente también, porque es otra cosa que ellos les dicen a los familiares que hablen con nosotros de qué manera podemos facilitar o de qué manera podemos trabajar juntamente para hacer para luchar para su liberación de ellas mismas, ¿verdad? La otra diapositiva, por favor. ¿Cuáles son las metas grandes con la línea de Hutto? Lo primero es proveer asesoramiento legal para que ellas puedan luchar para su propia liberación. 2, facilitar a las personas que puedan comunicarse con sus seres queridos. 3, de que ellas realmente puedan contar con un equipo fuera que ayuda a su liberación, porque nos hemos dado cuenta que en ocasiones cuando ellas levantan su voz adentro del centro de detención, las ponen en aislamiento o son transferidas a otros centros de detención. En el momento que son transferidas a otro centro de detención, ellos todavía pueden llamar hacia nosotros y nosotros vamos a tener el monitoreo de en qué centro de detención se encuentra la persona. Entonces, porque realmente cuando uno recibe las llamadas, se escucha en la grabación en qué centro de detención están Y también siempre las hemos monitoreado por el sistema de internet online. Usamos el sistema también para monitorear en qué centro de detención está y cuándo son transferidas. Y también esta línea es importante porque se va transfiriendo a diferentes mujeres que están dentro y ellas mismas empiezan a decirnos cuándo las personas han sido movidas, cuándo ICE está cometiendo actos atroces, porque hemos visto que ha habido mucho abuso sexual, ha habido una medicación totalmente errónea, personas que han sido víctimas de agresión física y psicológica por los guardias del centro de detención. Han habido asesinatos, han habido, no asesinatos, perdón, han habido muertes que han sido provocadas por diferentes aislamientos de personas. Cuando van a ese lugar de aislamiento, el cuarto no está totalmente capacitado para tener a ninguna persona. Entonces las demás compañeras puedan darnos esa información y es así como podemos llevar una campaña a fin. Entonces, en otras palabras, la línea es un método, una herramienta específica para luchar juntamente con el sistema carcelario. La otra diapositiva, por favor. Uno de los frutos es la mayor cantidad de mujeres que hemos podido liberar desde que tenemos la línea. Hemos tenido más comunicación con las mujeres, sabemos qué es lo que está pasando, hemos ayudado a hacer pagos de fianza, coordinar todos estos pagos con las familias, hemos proveído una cantidad de sponsor o hemos ayudado a llenar sus aplicaciones para que puedan salir bajo un parol. Como por ejemplo, ahorita cuando inició COVID, había muchas personas enfermas que todavía no habían recibido un tratamiento médico, no habían sido vistas por un médico y otras que estaban con más riesgos de salud, que tenían asma, que tenían una presión alta y otras enfermedades que eran más propensas a contraer el COVID. Entonces, nosotros por medio de la línea recibimos esas llamadas y podemos someter a unos paroles para que ellas puedan liberadas. Creo que tuvimos alrededor de 6 personas que fueron liberadas por medio de ese parol que nosotros sometimos para ayudar a estas mujeres con estas enfermedades fuertes. También, ¿verdad? Nos hemos contado con muchas limitaciones. Como ustedes saben, ICE siempre ha estado poniendo tropiezos sobre nuestro trabajo que hemos hecho para la liberación de más mujeres. Nos han bloqueado en 2 ocasiones nuestra línea. Nuestra línea ha sido bloqueada y donde ya no, las mujeres nos llaman con tarjetas y nos dicen, este número ya no está funcionando, este número dice que no existe, o específicamente es porque ICE hace todos los trámites necesarios para bloquear nuestras líneas para que no podamos seguir organizando dentro del centro de detención. Esa es una de nuestras limitaciones que sabemos que pasa con la línea. 2, las mujeres son transferidas. Cuando necesitamos introducir nuevamente eso nos cuesta que necesitamos introducir nuevamente el número. Cuando hay un grupo, por ejemplo, de 5 o 10 personas que están utilizando esta línea y ahí se da cuenta, automáticamente tal vez no va a bloquear, pero empieza a transferir a las mujeres para que dejen de seguirse organizando y que nosotros no tengamos esa comunicación con ellas. Pero utilizamos otros métodos para volver a introducir nuestra línea para poder seguir haciendo nuestro trabajo dentro del centro de detención. Actualmente contamos con la línea en inglés y en español, que son la mayoría de llamadas que se reciben, aunque también hemos recibido llamadas en otros idiomas y a veces nos ha costado buscar personas que puedan recibir estas llamadas, que podamos darle este asesoramiento. Creo hemos ayudado como a 5 mujeres de África que hablan otro diferente idioma, que han sido liberadas, hemos pagado sus fianzas y también ha utilizado la línea para poder ayudarse. Entonces estamos también trabajando de cómo podemos ir amplificando otro tipo de idiomas también para recibir estas llamadas y darles el servicio a todas por igual. También las llamadas, como lo dije anteriormente, son grabadas por ICE. No podemos hablar específicamente, completamente de todo un caso, porque todas las llamadas son grabadas y no podemos poner a las mujeres en un riesgo que pueda afectar algo en su caso. Entonces, las llamadas tienen que ser muy cuidadosamente de lo que se habla, del tema que se está tocando con la persona, y específicamente porque tampoco somos abogados. Eso es algo que realmente siempre recalcamos. No somos abogados, somos personas que impactadas, que tienen las mismas experiencias, que pueden facilitar o ayudar a poder trabajar los mismos casos, ¿verdad? Entonces, siempre decimos eso, no somos abogados, pero vamos a hacer todo lo posible y tratamos de hacer conexiones con abogados que trabajen juntamente cuando nosotros no tenemos esa respuesta. Entonces buscamos una ayuda legal que pueda ayudar a responder ciertas preguntas, ya que ICE nos puede grabar todo lo que hablamos en esta línea. Y creo que también algo bien específico que olvidé decirlo al principio, antes entraba a hacer visitas al centro de detención, pero cuando ahí se dio cuenta que empezamos a organizar por medio del programa de visitas, me bloquearon a mí. Está Claudia, que es nuestra jefa, Bethany, que es otra persona que organiza también, que está en el departamento de investigación, y yo estamos bloqueadas para entrar al centro de detención. Entonces estamos totalmente prohibidas desde que empezamos a organizar. Entonces, hemos tratado en la línea, ha servido un canal para seguir organizando, aunque ya no pueda entrar, todavía sigue siendo un canal de información para poder seguir haciendo el trabajo dentro de Hutto. ¿Puedes poner la otra presentación? Ok, creo que esta es la parte de mi compañera Alicia, pero voy a estar lista para las preguntas que puedan hacer en un momento.
Awesome, cool. And I will definitely try to be conscientious of time for the sake of questions as well. So I wanted to uplift something that Sulma said in her presentation, right? That this both the Hutto hotline and the community hotline, they're defense lines, right? They're not hotlines. So it is important for us, the language that we use, that this is a defense hotline, because it also informs what people can and should expect, right? When they're calling the other side of when they're calling, and who's going to be on the other side, right? Also, something that we, just like the Hutto hotline, something that we do always say is, listen, we are not attorneys. We do not have attorneys on staff. So we are not legal representatives. We do not offer legal representation. But what we can offer is someone that has gone through either this experience that you or your loved one has gone through, right? We can offer you sort of a guide along, right? And you will be surprised at how comforting often that is, and how often that is exactly what the other person on the other side needs to hear. And I really want to amplify that 9 times out of 10 people are looking just for guidance, so a little bit of orientation, because we can call an attorney, but the attorney might not take their time to just explain the process, right, and walk us through a little bit of those fears and anxiousness. So again, that is the definitely sort of the feeling, right, we want to convey, and can only be done when the person on the other side, or the person that is creating the training, right, has gone through it, is directly impacted by the systems that people are calling about, right? So la linea de defensa, or the community defense hotline. So that's the hotline that I, along with another partner, another colleague at Grassroots Leadership, help run. And well, this was actually when I already came on staff. It was a hotline that was running already, and it was a hotline that started in the year in 2016, and it was as a response, really, to the overwhelming questions. It was a hotline that started to just a lot of overwhelming questions. It was at a height that we were seeing families arrive, the caravan. So there was a huge need for just direct resources, right? And so the hotline really started as that. It was a hotline that was just service oriented, meaning there was a resource. It was resource provided oriented. You call, you could get a number, you could get directly connected to rent, food, any type, medical type of aid. A lot of the folks that ran the hotline or that were the volunteers came from a social worker background, and it was established with a Monday to Sunday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. a workflow. Now we continue moving through that, and what happened in 2017 and here locally in Austin, right, was that we actually had raids of this. Still, this is under the Obama administration, right? In Austin, we had about 200. Once everything was said and done, there was about 200 folks that were picked up in this raids that were, not. They were different in that we had not. And that we, as an immigrant community, when we think of raids, we think of the big buses arriving at the meat factory, right? At the I don't know, and factories, well, hotels. And so this raids, right, to pick up 200 people, actually what they were doing were SUVs, right, that were targeting people. And instead of taking the one person that they were looking for, they would take all 5 people in that one vehicle. They were taking people, snatching up people early in the morning, late in the evening, right as soon as they got out of work. And so this really put the community at a heightened, not only just fear level, but really left with, and who do we call? I am witnessing this person being snatched before me, this person, like my neighbor being pulled in, and him and his wife taken, and I have nowhere to call. And so the only number that was in people's sort of radar at that time in the Austin community was this hotline. So now they were calling not because they needed resources, but asking, what do we do? I am witnessing this. What can you do? What should I do? And so really in 2017, the hotline, put out a call for volunteers, both that could, for 2 types of volunteers, one that could answer the calls, overwhelming number of calls, and then for people that could go out and witness this kidnappings, this snatchings, right, of that ICE was committing on the Austin streets. And really it was there at that moment that we realized that there was a gap, and it was a gap that needed to be filled. And that gap was for people to report whenever there was an actual raid happening, or they wanted to report something that they knew was not right. They might not be able to name it, but they knew it wasn't right, and it needed to be recorded, right? And it was also at this time that we created something called La Migra en la Mira. So from the folks, the call out of for volunteers, for folks to witness these things. And it was witnessing, meaning I'm gonna go, is immigration still there, take my phone out, record, because often what we find, right, is that immigration will break rules if they feel that they can get away with it. So we have a crew of folks that we call Migra en la Mira, and that they are activated only via, right, the hotline whenever we get a calls for witnessing of people being picked up by ICE during the raid times, right? And during when we do feel that there is more threats on the street, this hotline becomes open 24/7, and we encourage folks to call at whatever time, because we know ICE works in the dark, and so often it will be 6 a.m., 5 a.m. when they're picking up people, or late in the evening, right? Next slide, please. So with previous one. So with that said, right, it's important also what happened in 2017, 2016, 2017, GRL became a base building organization. Prior to that, we were an organization that really focused, was research heavy and focused on doing research and on putting out reports that could inform policy, right? But they were just reports. So by becoming a base building organization, that meant it also took on the responsibility of whatever campaign work we chose to do needed to be directly informed and led by the needs being named by the community most directly impacted, right? And so we needed a way to stay in contact communication, even with those folks that were not part of our direct membership, right? Because we know that sometimes, even if we had accessible hours, not everybody has access to community spaces. So we needed to have a way to access even those people. The hotline was becoming and has become that way as well. And at that same time also, because we became an organization that was led by directly impacted people, right? We, as someone that is impacted, right? As someone that lives under the threat of deportation, I know that when I need help for rent, I know that whenever I need help finding a loved one, I might be able to get that help, but that's not going to solve the problem at the root, right? And so we knew that we also needed to create a tool, as Sulma has called it, right? Because it is what that is what our hotlines are, the tool to help us chip. We don't expect this to be the silver bullet, nothing ever is, but do help us chip away at the mass accumulation of power that carceral system has gained into people's lives, everyday lives, right? And so we also needed the hotline to do that. We needed to go to have it go through the shift of being of having been just a resource providing hotline into actually how do we use it as a tool? How do we use it at large in the community to defend ourselves? Next slide. So that is the process that it went through, right? It went through a literal change, and I'm just going to chime in a little bit on what that change did, right? The big picture for what we hope the big picture at the end of the shift was that the hotline was going to be led by a directly impacted person, me, and other colleagues. And it is going to be a tool that informed policy, narrative work, and casework, right? How do you inform policy and narrative work? Through casework. We get calls that are saying, I loved one was stopped by this police officer that asked this questions. Hey, well, there's a policy against that. This is not supposed to have happened, right? So whenever politicians are trying to tell us that's a resolved issue, actually not. Instead of a resolution, it needs to be in a resolution being just a symbolic kind of gesture at the local city level, right? Maybe this needs to be an ordinance, right? An actual law with some weight behind it. That also meant that if we were going to try and have this, we were going to have some sort of responsibility towards the community, right? And that meant that we needed to hold ourselves accountable as well. And that comes through via the case work, meaning the individual work, one-on-one work that we're doing with this person. A person calls us, I have a loved one, I fear for, this is the criminal situation, this might be the immigration consequences. Together, collectively, let's find a place of intervention. Next slide, please. And it is through that collaborative work between a family member, and I say family member because we have, blood chosen family. It's often just a loved one that calls. It is through that collaborative work between what they know about that person that needs the actual help and what we know, that we actually are able to design, to find first an intervention or a series of interventions that can and might help that person. And then through that, we also develop, right, a defense plan. Often that defense plan, the hotline is not the only form of defense that we have. It is part of a larger approach. We, as Fuera, right, we have what we call I want to call it our community defense ecosystem. Is we have the hotline, we have our Wednesday office hours, we have our community, Fuera de Austin, our community group, bi-monthly meetings. We also have our actual La Migra en la Mira, which is the physical activation, right, of bodies to witness when ICE is there threatening to take someone, right? We also have via accompaniment, we have court watch, right? We have accompaniment and court watch being just witnessing the court, whether the person might witnessing what is going on in the courts, right? And then actual accompaniment, in our case, for whenever someone is really scared to go and pay their tickets in a county courthouse like Bastrop, which tends to be very racist, right? And often cause immigration on anybody. And so they don't want to go by themselves. We will ensure that a citizen, right, will go with that person and be ready to take action in case something out of the norm happens, right? So again, the hotline, it is part of a larger sort of defense ecosystem, but it is the root, it is the way we have developed over the years a trust with people. One, that we're going to answer. Second, that the person that's going to answer is the person that has gone through that same experience as you. So in that way, is someone whom you don't have to use the proper political language, that if you say la chota, la migra, we're gonna know that you mean immigration, right? All of this beautiful work, of course, has not come without its challenges. We can go a little bit back. I just wanted to the previous slide, Taylor, thank you. Really quick, just for the sake of people's personal knowledge, right? We are very similar in that we do have a standardized sort of intake. Those questions, again, are questions that we developed, questions that we know over the years as someone that is impacted. What will people actually know the answers to? What are the terms, the words that people use to identify either the systems themselves or like the actors, right? So policía, right? Or la patrulla fronteriza, or would you want to say what color were their uniforms? Sometimes that's how people are going to identify, and help us identify who the actual arresting agency was. So we definitely have an intake that we have tailored. We make agreements between us as organization and the family, right? That this is something that we're not doing for them. We are doing alongside with them, right? We are learning together. We also always ask, look, especially if it's a case that we want to put a lot of campaign work into or make very public, this is how it's going to impact the system. Our goal is always to educate, for the family to come out stronger, empowered through their own self-education, right? That is the core. People that make up ICE for the Austin, majority of them are people that have gone through a case themselves, that came in through either a hotline or through the word of mouth, right? I mentioned those interventions, those being accompaniment, advocacy, public campaign, referrals, sometimes very simple. What also those calls offer is we do have to take time and do the information processes, right? Through the recording of the calls, information recording, we have volunteers and ourselves, right? We take log of all the calls, types of calls. Those inform what is going on the streets versus what politicians are telling us should be going on the streets, right? So how can we make a policy either stronger, or how can we say, you know what, this isn't working, we need something stronger? So it does inform in that way directly our policy work. Literal examples in Austin, the hotline has been quoted, cited to inform a cite and release policy. Also, I would give it credit for being a big pusher in having created the RISE Fund, which was the RISE Fund being money that the city set aside for people independent of immigration status during the COVID ongoing crisis, I'll call it. And it's not a crisis, during COVID. And so, yeah, next slide. And so with that said, a lot of this great work does not come without its challenges. One of them being the accessibility of tech. In our dream world, right, all of our current volunteers would be folks that could be monolingual and still participate. However, the truth is that technology is not there. We use two tech platforms, Law Lab to record all the info, and it's still not translated. All the coding help, and it's still not translated, or able to just translate with a click of a button. And then we use also Heroku. Again, we've asked, and it is not translated. It's not possible to do translation. Law Lab is very expensive for a lot of new folks that want to use it. However, we got on early on as a trial. And so we get a sweet discount, right? And something that we learned through Haruko is that once you give your number to them, they own it. So we're stuck with them, right? So hence, informed whenever the Hutto hotline came around, we said, well, it's going to be a Google number because we can't afford to not have ownership of our number, right? And so also just to name real quick, we did go into 2017. I named the challenge was we had to almost do a 180 shift, right? From service oriented to how do we use this to activate community power. And we didn't have the direct buy-in from the original folks that were volunteering to answer those calls. So we did see an exodus of volunteers, right? We did not have, I would say, complete buy-in from people that were not directly impacted, very well intentioned, but not directly impacted and could not understand why we needed to use a hotline as a tool instead of just providing that service, right? And so there's a very question for another day, right? Or a thing to dive into another day, but there's a disconnect sometimes that happens between folks that are at the front of answering hotlines. And then one of our biggest challenges personally, very different from Sulma, we have tried to figure out, we know that often we have tried to figure out a variety of ways to actually have direct county jail access, right? Because more often than not, we know that the faster that we are able to find an intervention at the criminal justice system, the better immigration outcome we might have. And so sometimes we find that a person calls us and they've been inside jail 3 days, 2 days, and have already agreed to sign a plea deal that could have huge ramifications on the immigration side. And so the not having direct, not being able to have someone call us directly the moment that they land in jail often has chipped away at precious time for us, and it's still something that we're working through. And I believe that that's all. Again, I just wanted to name to say that there were challenges, and happy to answer any questions that there might be any.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alicia and Sulma. There was so much information there, and we've already gotten some questions from folks online. So maybe we'll start with those, and then I'll finish up with some questions that we've, that are burning with me. But one of them is really around the volunteers that you both mentioned. I mean, I think you were really clear that the people who are staffing these hotlines are people who have direct impact experience. And you talked a bit about how that's so important from a language perspective, not just literally language, but understanding what words actually make sense to describe the experiences of being on the inside or being without status. And so there's a question beyond that in terms of just trying to understand, how do you find the people who are volunteers? Are they generally all people who come to you for some sort of support and then over time become, community leaders or activists through the organization? And how do you sustain the volunteers? There's a question around the fact that these laws and policies are ever changing. And so how do you continue to respond as these laws and policies are changing? So question around how your recruitment of volunteers, keeping them, with you, and then really around the training component, which Sulma, you talked a little bit about in terms of, even trying to understand and explain what a bond is. Like, how do you do that type of training within the organization? So Sulma, maybe you want to start, and then Alicia.
Sí, claro. Bueno, normalmente damos entrenamientos, tenemos diferentes programas, tenemos el programa de visitas que anteriormente funcionaba nada más para personas que querían entrar y visitar a las personas y darles apoyo moral. Pero después, cuando yo entré a Grassroots también para formar parte de este programa, yo como mujer impactada dije, bueno, realmente yo ya estuve en ese centro de detención y creo que lo que necesitaba yo dentro de ese centro de detención es de que alguien me orientara a qué es un asilo, qué es un parol. Son términos académicos que normalmente tal vez muchas de las personas que están dentro del centro de detención no conocen. Entonces, como lo mencionó Alicia, tenemos que utilizar un lenguaje más suave, un vocabulario más entendible, porque hay muchas personas, por ejemplo, en Hutto o en muchos centros de detenciones que no hablan español, que no hablan inglés o que hablan algún otro idioma o un dialecto. Específicamente, yo conocí mucha gente de Guatemala también que no hablaban español ni inglés. Entonces era difícil buscar un intérprete para ellos. Entonces fue ahí donde nosotros como Grassroots empezamos a trabajar y a crear un manual, un programa de capacitación para las personas que fueran a visitar, que ya no fuera solo voluntariado de ir a dar apoyo moral, sino que realmente entendieran qué era el proceso del asilo, qué pasa cuando cruzan por el río, qué pasa cuando pasan por el puente, qué pasa cuando pierdes una entrevista de miedo creíble, qué es una entrevista de miedo creíble, qué es una apelación. Entonces, las personas se hacen un llamado a los miembros de la comunidad que están interesados a recibir ese entrenamiento y que tienen el compromiso de querer ayudar hasta nuestras personas impactadas. Y entonces ellos llegan, reciben el entrenamiento y después son acompañados juntamente con otra persona que tenga experiencia a visitar para ver cómo se está desarrollando la visita o cómo está recibiendo esa información. Después de eso, ellos llenan una forma donde se graba toda la información y que de ahí mismo van saliendo los casos de cómo podemos ayudar a un caso a que la persona salga o a que sea una campaña más fuerte. Eso es lo que pasa por lo menos en los programas de visitas, de llamadas, en los programas de sponsor. Todos los programas que tenemos, todas son personas que hemos hecho llamados y que han escuchado las historias de personas impactadas. Y obviamente todos estos programas van con la compañía de mujeres que han salido del centro de detención, que el grupo se llama Mujeres Luchadoras, que también dirijo, y son mujeres que anteriormente estuvieron encarceladas y que tienen esa experiencia y que están luchando, que son las únicas voces que pueden decir lo que realmente pasa para poder seguir construyendo más energía, porque sabemos que si seguimos el liderazgo de personas impactadas, realmente vamos a poder quebrar el sistema. Así es como, por lo menos en el área de Hutto lo hacemos, ¿verdad? Y no sé si Alicia quiere decir algo más.
Very similar. I'll go very fast. What we do is just like Sulma, we do call out, how do we find, let me take a step back. I think that what we have learned is there has to be intentionality in every part of it, even in the places that you're going to do outreach to, right? If we want bilingual volunteers, then go to places where you're going to find bilingual people. Send emails to bilingual, departments. We don't want to stick to just academics, so don't just do outreach to the universities, right? And so you have to actually develop a plan, which is what I had to do. I developed a plan of both an outreach plan, and then on top of that is there's this sort of feeling that we must scarcity in volunteers. We have to take anybody and everybody, right? That comes in, and I have learned that is probably works against your efforts. And so what we do, our process was we decided, we created an outreach plan. We executed it. After that, we had already done a training, a very accessible, direct, simple PowerPoint training. These are the kinds of calls you expect. These are the kinds of calls you expect. This is how we're responding. But more importantly, we described that this was an organizing tool. We said, this is what the linea is. This is what it is not, right? This is what is expected of you, right? I think that there's often this fear of we're going to lose someone, and it's not, right? And in a way to do that is by being able to present these are the successes that we've had. These are the changes that we've been able to do. A way to that we presented that was we take people on a journey of an example of a casework, right? Where we had a call, we found the intervention alongside the family. The family did some public campaigning. What did we end up with? A person that was released and actually ended up getting his DACA, right? So we're able to present what is possible if they have faith in what we're asking them to do, right? Now we also are very clear that nothing is 1, 2, 3, ABC, that there are a multitude of things, right? And also this implies that you always have to make yourself available, right? We have people record lines. With me, our linea de defensa, I'm on 1 week. I have a colleague that is on a whole other week. Being on means we answer whenever we don't have shifts covered. Being on means that if at any moment a volunteer has a question, we are made available to them, right? Via text or call. We also, so we're very intentional about developing our training and our outreach program. And what we do is we do have to let people know what happens with these cases, right? They want to know that their work is actually making a difference. And that was feedback that we got directly from volunteers. And so last Christmas we didn't do it, but we do have a sort of a celebration, and we do send out a little bit of updates, like this is what happened with that case, this person is out. And that motivates a lot, right? Motivation is really good, and that motivates people a lot. And also these are people that are also, these volunteers are folks that are in it to change the system, right? They believe in what we're doing. And so we also see them as allies. They're not just volunteers to answer our calls. These are people that show up at Hutto actions. These are people that are going to show up whenever we have a call to testify against something at city council, right? And so because immigration changes so often, we also find ourselves sometimes that we have to address a part of the training. And so we send out a general at large invite, send out meaning via email and WhatsApp, an update. And then we try to do intimate sort of check-ins, right? On intimate being like Zoom now, check-ins on like, what are we doing? What are we seeing? And it is time consuming, but this is how you build sustainability in this types of things, right? And for me, it's very important because this is probably our strongest tool that we have currently right now.
Quick follow-up for both of you, just on logistics. Are the hotlines 24 hours? Are they only for the Hutto one? Is that only for women? You mentioned that women call from other detention centers. So are you limited to Texas? Are you 24 hours? There's some questions in the audience about that.
I'll answer real quick since I'm on, and then Sulma, you can clear up the Hutto part. Our linea de defensa comunitaria is 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Sunday. The only time we do, the systems allow us to see what calls we missed and at what time, so we're able to return calls, right? So we don't necessarily have to miss a call. Now, if we see, and being on means that after 9 p.m., if I have someone calling me 5 times, I'm going to answer, right? That the hotline is going to be answered because that may be, or if we start blowing up like 70 calls, right? Which often happens when there's sightings of immigration. We know that there's a sort of a crisis and we need to activate, another thing. Only when we have confirmed eye sightings or that there has been raids, do we put out via our Facebook pages, like call us, we are open 24/7, ready to listen to you and take action on whatever the community is reporting. So we are linea de defensa open 24/7 only during raid operations or raid sightings.
Yo voy a hablar un poco acerca de la línea de Hutto. La línea de Hutto solo está habilitada de 8 de la mañana a 6 de la tarde, y de lunes a viernes, ya que anteriormente no tenían limitaciones para llamar, pero ahora ya tienen horarios específicos que les imponen para poder llamar. Incluso a veces son 3 teléfonos que hay en cada cubículo e incluso les ponen horarios para que puedan llamar. Entonces, esos son los únicos horarios en que ellos puedan llamar desde las 8 de la mañana, porque antes de las 8 ellas están todavía encerradas en sus cuartos bajo llave si pueden salir, y antes podía estar hasta medianoche fuera de sus cuartos, pero ahora a las 9 de la noche ya no pueden estar fuera de sus habitaciones, sino que son laqueadas en sus propios cuartos. Entonces, por eso la línea funciona de lunes a viernes de 8 a 6 de la tarde para Hutto.
Okay, thank you. There's another couple questions that are coming through, but as I look through those, I just wanted to check in with you both around the question of privacy and security. You mentioned with technology and the calls being recorded and ownership of the phone line numbers and things. What are some of the challenges you've been thinking about and you've experienced with technology and issues of security, and how have you been working through those challenges? Either, both hotlines would be really, I think, useful for people to hear, since the tool itself relies on telecom.
Sorry, so could you ask that question? Sulma, if you're ready to answer, you can go, but I got distracted with the reading, but if you could.
No problem. Just a little bit, just to talk about how the technology is impacting your work when you're thinking about defense and you're thinking about security defense and privacy defense of the communities you're working with, and the role that technology can play in that. As a negative thing. How are you responding to that challenge? What are you thinking about at Grassroots that might be useful for others who would want to build a similar hotline?
Yeah, really good question. I would be completely forthcoming and honest that I think that was not something that we prioritized in 2016, 2017, whenever it was created and whenever we launched on to the 2 tech things that we have, right? That being LawLab and Heroku. LawLab is a lot much better about the security. They actually are really good because they were created, LawLab was created by like-minded sort of tech attorneys. It's a combination of folks, right? And so they really thought about the security part. Heroku, on the other hand, which is the tech part where our phone actually sort of lives, it was what was available at the moment, and we needed it. And so I think that moving forward, I would definitely ask that anybody that does this, one, always ask who owns the information, who has access to the information, right? And I think that there has been a little bit of development in people that are developing kind of programs that folks can use with the intention of making it accessible price-wise to organizations. But security is really, really important. I mean, we definitely know there are communities that through ICE, we've learned that no community is ever safe. All they have to do is make a request from the city, from the county. There are policies that are sold as smart cities, and those are the ones that we have to watch out for. So I think that always be aware of that small print of what is available if a government puts in a request for information to be turned over, right? And it might seem like far-fetched, but I think that as the world becomes more interconnected, via tech, right? We don't have to look far. I mean, just we can take a dive into Mi Gente's tech reports, and that should really inform you, on what maybe companies to stay away from and whatnot. But it is something that we are aware of, and that's also why we choose often to use identifiers, like yes, first name maybe, but maybe not the full last name, right? Because there are things that aren't going to impact the case whenever we're recording the information.
Sulma, is there anything you want to add, or we can go to another question? No pressure.
No, creo que Alicia contestó todo. Podemos continuar con la siguiente pregunta.
Great. There is a specific question, well, maybe one of you can look at while I ask a broader question around some support that someone's looking for work in the Portland area, the Portland Immigrants' Right Coalition. So if you want to take a look at that at some point, one of you. And also there's been a lot of comments around whether or not this recording will be available. It will be. We will be sharing the recording of the session and the handout to all of you who have registered for the event. So we talked a little bit about COVID and its prolonged existence in our lives. Can you talk a little bit about how you adjusted within the COVID time, how the hotlines kind of, did they, and if they did, how did they adjust to the more virtual setting that we find ourselves in, and how did it impact the work that you were doing with communities who were either detained or on the outside?
Sulma, do you want to go since I answered the last one, or I can also answer this one?
Yeah, bueno, como yo trabajo específicamente en el área de detención, ¿verdad? Estoy directamente trabajando con personas que están dentro del centro de detención. Una de las cosas más terribles que nos puede pasar a nosotros es de que nos hayan prohibido el poder entrar al centro de detención. Entonces, aparte que no solo yo estoy prohibida, sino que no está pudiendo entrar nadie al centro de detención y que tampoco abogados podían entrar al centro de detención, que la correspondencia que estábamos enviando estaba siendo separada por más de 15 días en un lugar de aislamiento. Hasta después de 15 días estaban entregando la correspondencia a las mujeres, y entonces eso ha limitado más el poder seguir trabajando con ellas, y las líneas también se saturaban más también, porque también era más poco tiempo que le daban a las mujeres para hacer sus llamadas, porque tenían un protocolo adentro de tener que sanitizar el espacio donde van a llamar, cada cuánto tiempo puede llegar una persona a pararse y hablar. Entonces eso limitó también a que las personas pudieran comunicarse con nosotros. Hemos tenido una baja de llamadas nosotros actualmente, por lo mismo que también las personas han sido transferidas a diferentes centros de detención. Hemos tenido ese contacto con abogados también para preguntar si es la misma situación que están teniendo ellos, porque estamos trabajando con unos abogados que daban una capacitación, una presentación como un asesoramiento legal también dentro del centro de detención, pero ahora ni ellos mismos pueden ir, sino que simplemente se graban ellos mismas y lo envían y las mujeres lo ven adentro, pero realmente no es malo, pero tampoco es como algo específico donde la persona tiene alguna pregunta y puede hacerla en ese momento. Entonces creo que se está limitando mucho para todos seguir haciendo nuestro trabajo. Y creo que eso es algo bien limitante, ¿verdad? Para nuestro trabajo, pero todavía la línea sigue siendo una opción todavía, que podamos recibir todavía llamadas y podemos tener contacto con la familia, de poder seguir luchando y seguir trabajando para la liberación de las personas.
It didn't change. All of our calls are done remotely. You know, people, the way that our tech allows us to take calls is they're routed directly to your phone or a computer. So people will always continue to take in calls normally. Our trainings just went virtual, as well as check-ins like Zoom, like everything else. However, I think that what COVID did impact is the kind of costs that we were receiving, which then in turn informed the kind of work, right? There was a shift. I think COVID, the kind of calls that we got during COVID really pushed GRL to have a larger role than we normally would have had in the budget conversations at a local level, right? Via that, those budget conversations, we were able to create, to push and advocate and have people that had called the hotline, you know, really get activated in pushing the city to create the RISE Fund, which was a fund, again, that was going to offer direct cash assistance to people independent of legal status, right? It was a big advocacy lift in which the community was largely involved. And again, it was that came about because of the kinds of calls that we were getting of like, look, my landlord is about to kick me out. Like my husband is sick, I'm sick, like I don't have access to all these other things, right? And so there were things that we were able to uplift in advocacy spaces. So I think more than anything, COVID just informed the kind of work that we were doing, and when it came to budgeting.
Thank you both. It's such a challenging situation and continues on. There is a question around collaboration that I just want to broaden. This question is specifically around how legal service providers in the Hutto area, in the Austin area, can better collaborate with folks like yourself and other lawyers that are working with women who are seeking release, and to better kind of accelerate the potential of people getting out. But when thinking about legal empowerment, when thinking about what we're seeking to do, which is to recenter and focus those directly impacted to be much more engaged in their own justice struggles, that necessarily requires a different approach from the legal community. Lawyers have to come at it not as experts, but have to come at it as partners, as allies, as people who are listening more, who are more humble. And that's some of the things that we really think a lot about at the Bernstein Institute when we're working with students and other lawyers. From your perspective and the hotlines that you both are a part of, what advice would you give to lawyers that are interested in partnering with community-based organizations like yourself that want to kind of help accelerate freedom for people? What do you think makes a good collaboration with attorneys based on the experiences that you've had in this space?
Creo que nosotros, por lo menos siempre hemos tenido, ¿verdad?, diferentes colaboraciones con diferentes abogados, con diferentes organizaciones de abogados también, específicamente para Hutto, ya que a veces muchas mujeres no tienen familias dentro de Estados Unidos, y nosotros hacemos conexiones con algunas casas que pueden recibir a personas inmigrantes sin familia. Y hablo de esto, ¿verdad?, que para mí es bien importante, porque cuando yo llegué a Estados Unidos, y aún sigo acá, pero sin familia alguna, no tengo ningún familiar de sangre acá, pero para mí fue bien difícil iniciar a vivir, a construir un núcleo social de amistades, pero lo he logrado. Entonces viene a mi mente, ¿verdad?, de cómo es que muchas personas vienen acá también con eso, sin tener un familiar o alguien que pueda responder por ellos mismos. Entonces, cuando alguien no tiene un familiar, nosotros hacemos llamados a diferentes abogados que puedan patrocinar, que puedan tomar el caso pro bonos, que puedan ayudar a su caso y a su liberación también. En ocasiones hemos pedido que por favor puedan asesorarlos, que vayan a llenarle su aplicación de asilo, que puedan llenar su parol, que puedan tener un parol para ellos. Entonces creo que sí ha habido una colaboración con los abogados. Obviamente, cada vez que tenemos esa colaboración con los abogados, siempre hay ciertos acuerdos, ¿verdad?, de cómo vamos a proceder con la persona, específicamente si se queda aquí en Austin. Cómo vamos a proveer ciertas necesidades de las personas de techo, comida, vestuario. Antes de llegar a que este abogado pueda sacar a esta persona, nosotros tenemos que asegurarnos del bienestar, de dónde va a estar esta persona. Entonces, son casos muy específicos en los que trabajamos sobre esto, pero sí queremos decir de que trabajamos juntamente con abogados. También hemos hecho reportes con UT, con los estudiantes de UT, han sacado un reporte acerca de todo lo que ha pasado dentro del centro de detención de Hutto. Entonces creo que sí es importante cuando hay un liderazgo de personas impactadas como mujeres luchadoras, como hay fuera de Austin, que son personas líderes que realmente conocen el sistema y que pueden pedir y levantar sus voces únicamente con sus propias historias. Entonces creo que cuando se transmite y uno es bien intencional con obtener algo para proteger a la comunidad, creo que muchos abogados entienden ese sistema y tratan de apoyarnos. Como lo dijo Alicia, siempre debemos ser muy intencionales con lo que estamos pidiendo de ellos, ¿verdad? No sé si Alicia quieres decir algo.
Just keep it short. You said, what's the word that you use in advice, right? I would just say, we say that we are experts, right? And I think that that's something that a lot of people, like in the legal profession, are scared of, right? And we understand, we don't belittle like all the years of schooling that people have gone through, but at the same time, I think it's be willing to follow and not always lead. But most importantly, I would say, which happens, it's a conversation that we have to have with a lot of not just attorneys, other folks, academics, right? All the time, is be willing to take the risk that person is willing to take, right? Don't sort of try to push on your fears onto that other person, right? Believing that that you know best because you are the expert. And I think that there are a lot of people that might reflect and say, no, that's not me. But I think that once we look at our actions, right, like there's a term people throw around called gatekeeping, right? When are we practicing that? When are we really just allowing the person to make that full on decision, even if it's not the decision that you yourself would make for you? I think it's always, as I would ask any legal service provider, right, to if you're asked to join a campaign, if you're asked to join a space, to always put that as a filter, right? Whenever you feel that you are not in agreement with what is a next step of action. And I also think that often a big what I wish a lot of legal service providers would do a lot more of is actually create tools for us, right? Do accessible explainers. Like organizers like y'all sometimes have everything up here in our heads, right? And we don't like, we sometimes we just need to put it out. And so I would ask that legal, a way to really be more allies and actually make information accessible to a larger community of folks and collectively be able to reach more folks is to explain, right? Put out what is, I'm not saying put out legal advice, but put out what is this process, right? And then we can be willing to co-create like resources, right, that can be used as tools. I think that there needs to be a lot more written. I think there's this false sense that everybody's high tech. Put it on Facebook, make it in Spanish, and it's gonna go right. There's a huge number of people that still rely heavily that do not read or write, like Sulma said, and rely heavily on youth. And so if they are able to have it in written formats, and actually they will process it, right? Even though we do PowerPoint presentations, we also print out those PowerPoint presentations and have it in an old school binder. This is our Eyes Spread of the Austin sort of binder that we have, our conversation on power, on everything, right? All the presentations, history of policing, things that people can actually sit with and process at their own speed, at their own space, right? So yeah, I would say don't be afraid to take the risk that the community is willing to take. Help us create more tools and resources as well, written ones.
Such powerful suggestions for all of us. And so there are many more questions, but we are out of time. Unfortunately, we're getting to the last minute or so. For those of you who are still with us, we will be sharing a recording, as I mentioned, and the handouts, which lay out from both Sulma and Alicia's perspective, as you saw the different parts of the hotline. Deep gratitude to both Sulma and Alicia for taking the time to be with us and share really important, practical, concrete, and also philosophical suggestions on how we can do this work better, and really always thinking about who is the expert and who's the person that should be in the lead. And of course, big thanks to Azucena and Vic for your tireless interpretation. That is no easy job. And to the Immigration Advocates Network, we're so grateful for these teach-ins. We will be having another one in the next couple of months. So please do stay connected, and thank you all so much for your time. Take care, everyone.